No sooner had I made my video about listening than Jordan Peterson's now infamous interview with Kathy Newman came up on my autoplay list, and what better an example of a person having auditory hallucinations based on what she expected him to say could I have gotten. I'm sure most of you have seen the interview, and needless to say, it isn't hard to respond to arguments against points that you didn't make, so Peterson was able to navigate these misapprehensions fairly easily.
The reason that I write about lobsters is because there's this idea that hierarchical structures are a sociological construct of the Western patriarchy, and that is so untrue that it's almost unbelievable. And I use the lobster as an example because the lobster...
Jordan, lobsters don't have institutions. Okay, let me talk about social constructs in society for a minute. Constructing the good society or the good institution or the good workplace is not like landing on the moon, where you just need to know how objects in the universe do behave, and presto, you can get a rocket there. There are ways that human society should be, in spite of how people in it do act, think, react, or behave. I know the lobster thing was just a minor point, and you're right to say that just because a society is hierarchical doesn't mean that it's socially constructed, but the fact that human beings are intellectual and institutional animals does mean that our hierarchies are socially constructed. That is, our institutional hierarchies, which, if you're living in a human society in the first world in the 21st century, that's the kind of hierarchy we're talking about. They aren't sociological constructs of the Western patriarchy, but institutions are sociological constructs, and they're unique to human societies. That's why we can't just describe how people do behave without barriers of discrimination and laws and call it good enough. There are indeed social norms that might be doing, for example, women a disservice that might lead to the effects of workplace discrimination. There are considerations that can help undo some of the pigeonholing that we may have done through pre-industrial gender norms. That's just one small example, but the point is, the societal roles of lobsters are not influenced by sociological environments in this way. Lobsters don't look at billboards and magazine ads and TV shows that enforce or reinforce what their role in society is supposed to be. And those roles aren't decided by tradition in lobster societies the way that they have been in ours. This is the point that the postmodernist types that you talk about miss when they say that this is just a social construct. Well, I want to know what's wrong with the social construct. Because societal and institutional norms are socially and intellectually constructed doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're arbitrary. It doesn't mean that they're just nefarious consolidations of power by the powerful. And no, it doesn't mean that they're akin to the instinctive hierarchical structures of lobsters either. They follow their own set of laws and constants, so to speak, different from biological imperatives and unique to man. I bring this up because you and I seem to be very much at odds when it comes to the is-ought problem. You seem to think, just based on what I've seen of your videos and lectures, that is and ought are interchangeable somehow. But to the accusations that I've heard against you that you're a bigot or a bully or a transphobe, I can definitely say that you're not. Before I even knew who you were, I saw an interview where you said point blank that if a trans woman was in your class, you would refer to her as she. And I've never heard you say anything that I could construe as bigoted. I think you're a reasonable person. I just think you overreact sometimes. You came out against Bill C-16 not because it afforded protections to people, you didn't take issue with that, but because you felt that it was designed by leftists to force you to espouse leftist doctrine and to legally punish you for not espousing leftist doctrine. And I mean, if you read what it does, that is a little far-fetched.
In one of your lectures, you said the film Frozen was garbage. I don't think I said garbage. I think I said reprehensible propaganda, which I believe it was. Can you elaborate on your thoughts on the film? I can't because I haven't seen it recently enough to The only thing I can say is that I left the film with the strong sense that it was produced for ideological reasons, and it was produced as a sort of anti-Sleeping Beauty, and I felt that was entirely inappropriate because it wasn't a genuine artistic attempt, it was an ideological statement. I actually really liked Moana. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. I thought it was that, I like that, you know, that little girl in the movie allied herself with this very, very powerful, but rather uncivilized masculine force. And I thought they got the archetypal balance in that film really quite nicely. So I thought it was quite beautifully done. So.
Okay, now you're just being weird.
Voted up. 77 votes. Australia is holding a plebiscite on whether to legalize gay marriage. I'm against the Yes campaign, but only because it's backed by cultural Marxists. I'm curious to hear your views on gay marriage. Well, I would be against it too if it was backed by cultural Marxists, because it isn't clear to me that it will satisfy the ever-increasing, what would you call it, demand for an assault on tradition.
Yeah, because an important part of any legislation is to consider whether the cultural Marxists want it. You know what? I don't think you're a reasonable person. I don't. I think you've allowed your irritation with the people who work in the humanities departments at the University of Toronto to color your judgment about everything. And let's not pretend that that hasn't potentially made you just as tone deaf about some of these issues as Kathy Newman was toward you. I think you've been in academia so long that you're seeing cultural Marxists everywhere to the point where you can't even watch a cartoon without doing this.
Who are you?
What?
Who are you? The CIA? NSA? Your military? Who do you work for? Who do you work for? Who are you?
I'm just... Linda Litsky.
You... Oh. Oh.
And that is so infuriating when... I'm sorry to yell. I don't think you're wrong about everything. I just think you've allowed your experiences with these academic types to cloud your judgment and skew your vision to the point where you're over-exaggerating their influence. Don't stop what you're doing. Don't let people try to shut you up. Just please consider what I've said. The problems are solvable. Thank you.